now excited to introduce our next speaker. He's a man I actually admire a lot, particularly for his role in leadership at my alma mater, University of Miami. Dean Isaac Prilleltensky is the Dean of Education and Human Development at University of Miami. He's the Vice Provost for Institutional Culture, which means he is responsible for a positive and growth-oriented transformational change of the culture of the university at every level. He's the author of 8 books. He's published over 130 times. He most recently wrote a book called The Laughing Guide to Well-Being, and he's a wickedly funny guy. He writes humor. His humor has been featured in the Miami Herald, Miami Today, and online. Please join me in welcoming Dean Isaac Prilleltensky.
Thank you. Okay, how about here from the side? Okay, great. Great. Well, are you up for 5 minutes of laughter? Okay, perhaps 6, but definitely not 7. Okay, well, thanks very much for having me. My talk today is about my new book, The Laughing Guide to Well-Being. And it's right here. I think it's also available in the bookstore, and that's the big plug and the only plug for the day, okay? So, The Laughing Guide to Well-Being, using humor and science to become happier and healthier. For those of you who are feeling a little depressed over the last elections, I want you to know that I have good news. Today I'm announcing my campaign for president, Isaac 2020. I have 3 slogans: Make America Laugh Again, Sillier Together, and no matter what you do, you are always my basket of adorables. In the book, I laugh mostly about myself in the book, but also about Miami, from which I learned so much. In Miami, I learned that a city can run without a prefrontal cortex. For those of you who haven't heard of the prefrontal cortex, it's the part of the brain in charge of driving, signaling, Medicare fraud, and plastic surgery. People without a prefrontal cortex drive without signaling, engage in corruption, and have an unstoppable urge to inject silicone into their butts and breasts. Now, seriously, humor can contribute to learning, positive emotions, psychological well-being, happiness, and health. So this is why I call my approach Smarter Through Laughter. Now, in the book, the first part of each chapter is about the laughing side, and the second part is about the learning side. Now, there are 6 domains of well-being. So we'll do the laughing side, we do the learning side, and then we talk seriously about 6 domains of well-being, which I call interpersonal, community, occupational, physical, psychological, and economic well-being. So now, we're going to talk today mainly about the laughing side. Okay, then if you want to read about the learning side, you're going to have to buy the book, okay? But before we begin, we're going to play a game. So the first story is called Existential Worries, but we're going to play a game, and the literature says that there are 4 types of humor: self-enhancing, affiliative, self-deprecating, and what they call aggressive humor. I'm going to read you a very short story, and then it's your job to tell me what kind of humor that is, okay? So we get it? So self-enhancing is about self-aggrandizing. Affiliative is about creating bonds with other people. Self-deprecating, everybody knows what it is. You put yourself down. And aggressive is just being aggressive. So there are these 4 types of humor. The literature says that the first 2 are the most important, but I really like self-deprecating humor as well. So the first story is about psychological well-being, and it's called Existential Worries. Can you still hear me? Okay, good, good. Can you still see me? Okay, good, good. We're all here. So let's get started. One of my goals in life is to overcome existential worries, such as my big ears, my girly voice, and my envy of people who fly first class. Really, these worries have a terrible impact on my well-being. I've always had insecurities, even before I was born. As an unborn, my primary concern was to beat 300 million sperm in the quest to fertilize an egg. Now, then when I was born, I had two main concerns. First one was circumcision, and the second one was feeling guilty for crying during the procedure. So growing up, I really developed a lot of worries, you know. For years, I've suffered from people confusing me with members of the opposite sex on the phone. I have yet to come up with a proper response when people on the other end of the line call me Mrs. To prevent such embarrassment, I have occasionally tried to project a very manly voice on the phone, especially with people I don't know. Alternatively, I say, "This is Isaac Prilleltensky calling," to which people often reply, "How can I help you, ma'am?" So now to go back, really, to talk about first-class envy, I know this is a condition afflicting millions of people who fly economy, especially those who fly long hours with their knees up to their chins. Now, to cope with this malady, I have a number of recommendations I want you to take very seriously. Number one, overthrow the government, nationalize the airlines, and eliminate first class. Number two, develop an envy elimination pill. And number three, stay home. Now, okay, so what kind of humor was this? Self-deprecating, that's right. I have a great time with self-deprecation. You poor people, you don't have a girly voice. You can't be self-deprecating. So the next story is about psychological well-being and self-esteem. And it's called Nobel Prize, I'm Not Bitter. As everyone knows, October is Nobel Prize month. Accordingly, I freed up most of my days for the last weeks of October. But the phone call from the Nobel Committee never came. Although I'm not bitter, I have to admit I'm surprised. Considering that I was nominated in several categories, it was hard to believe that once again I was skipped over for the Nobel Prize. People all over the world recommended me in several categories. So let me show you some of the categories that I was recommended in. First, linguistics. Based on observational studies in Miami, I discovered that no matter how long or how well we Hispanics speak English, we cannot bring ourselves to use the word but instead of the word pero. We can speak flawless English, but the but will never replace pero. Have you noticed this? Yeah. Now, second, my second achievement is in medicine. I discovered that the failed launch of Obamacare a few years ago caused heartburn to the Democrats, while its replacement is causing heartburn to the Republicans. Number three, psychology. I discovered that when some presidents are challenged by the media, they developed erectile dysfunction, which is characterized by regression to the age of 2, the impulse to destroy the country, love affairs with Russia, and political suicide. Now, my fourth accomplishment is in physics. In Miami, I discovered The wavelength of the colors yellow, green, and red in traffic lights are all the same. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that I'm full of, pero I want you to know that I did have an uncle who received the Nobel Prize in medicine. And this is true. Cesar Milstein, who received the Nobel Prize in 1984, was married to my dad's cousin, Celia Prilleltensky, which goes to show you that in my family, we are smart enough to marry Nobel material, which is not a far cry from getting the Nobel Prize ourselves. Okay, so what kind of humor was this? Self-enhancing, right. So last story, pay attention. There is a test at the end, okay? So the next story is called clutter, okay? Does anybody have clutter in their house? Yes, okay, so I'll have all the solutions for you. So the reason I move continents every few years is to get rid of junk in our house. I plan on moving every so often to achieve important goals in my life. It's the only way I can manage to dispose of shoes, old clothes, linen, work documents, pots and pans, and matzo meal for Passover. So this is a picture of my wife who loves matzo meal from several years back, going back to the Exodus from Egypt. Now, my approach to clutter extermination is to open a big bag and empty most drawers into it for quick disposal. This is the reckless approach. Ora, my wife, she uses the melancholic approach. Melancholic approach is to examine old pictures, our son's report card from grade 2, Mother's Day cards, and immigration applications going back 4 countries. She peruses everything very slowly and methodically, only to proclaim, after hours of careful review, that she will make up her mind tomorrow. This attitude is especially problematic in our house, where we have a number of drawers where a lot of procreation takes place. I have proof that if we put in our drawers old paper clips with Mexican coins, they will have sex and produce AAA batteries. Thank you very much.